owners used to dine at other competitors' restaurants to see who's their cook and would ask them to come out to the table and undermine and underhandedly say, what's this guy paying you? You know, and they would say, what's this guy paying you? And you say, hey man, he's paying me, how's he treating you? And back then it was easy for an owner to buy his chef a car or get him an apartment or help him with his recreational activities. It was easy. I can remember I worked somewhere and I won't name them that every New Year's Eve, if we packed the house and got all the tables fed before midnight, there was a Gramblan Coke on the bar, envelope with $500, a bottle of Dawn or some Tattingers, and a pat on the back saying, man, you guys rocked it out tonight. Congratulations. Happy New Year. That's the kind of mentality that went on. That's the stuff that Anthony Bourdain talks about in Kinship Confidential that pissed our world off, because he told the truth about the pressures that go on with us day by day, and you're a rock star at work and you live in the projects and you go home on the L or something, and, you live in a real shitty world. But at work, you're a hero, you're a legend, or you're a rock star at work and you come from an abusive family, and at work, you're a god.
That's executive chef and brother from another mother, James Shirley. And on this episode of Chef Life Radio, we're going to be talking about what it was like to come up in the industry in Chicago in the 90s and how he went from the streets of the South Side to the shores of Hawaii. We'll talk about the demons that he had to fight along the way. And after the break, you're going to find out how you can do the same too. Doesn't matter where you're at, it only matters where you're headed. Stay tuned to find out what it really takes to succeed. This is Chef Life Radio, serving chefs just like you who want to enjoy their careers without sacrificing their lives. I'm your host, Adam Lamb, and over my 30-year career as a chef and hospitality professional, I've coached and mentored thousands of culinarians who led lives of contribution, community, and authentic leadership. Let me be your guide on this journey together, looking for solutions and perspectives to some of the biggest issues impacting the hospitality industry, our lives, and our careers today.
We chef!
And now, back to the show. I'd like to welcome to the show, very dear friend, executive chef James Shirley. What is up, my brother?
Man, Adam, it's been a journey, man. It's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you, man. I'm excited to hear about your journey, because we've stayed in touch, albeit a little bit. I could own some of that and say I could have been a little bit more present and reaching out, but we've managed to somehow stay connected throughout our entire careers. And so I'm just tickled to death that I get to see you and you're in the position you are, because when we first met, you didn't want to have anything to do with culinary. I mean, it was a little side hustle to you, right?
It was. I worked for the city of Chicago. And the crazy part about how I got into food is because of my passion for music, because of me being a musician. I'm a professionally trained musician. I had music in all my life. My mother's a world-renowned jazz singer, famous jazz singer. For those of you out there who are hipsters and like jazz and blues, she resides in New Orleans, and her name is Betty Shirley, and she's sang with just about everybody on the planet. And she resides in New Orleans, sings, and she's like 78 and still singing. She's still singing. She makes jewelry. She's a school teacher. But I got into cooking because I have a strong work ethic based on my family upbringing coming from the South. And I was raised by my grandparents, and it was like, we don't care what you do, you're going to work. We don't care what happens, you got to own your feet. And I remember there's some people that are some baby boomers that remember the term chores. You get home, you had chores to do. So I got a job. I had went to, let me back up. I went to grammar school, high school, middle school, marching band, concert band, jazz band, all city band, drum and bugle corps, played with a lot of artists. I was really good, and I still play, and I gotten into Gramblan State, and if anybody's seen the movie Drumline, I was like Nick, and I had a cocky, arrogant attitude. I went to Gramblan, Louisiana with a a suitcase full of clothes and weed and my attitude. And then I found out real quickly that I wasn't going to be welcome or tolerated with that. And so I was back in Chicago before I knew it. And my band director reached out for me again. And then I got into Vandercook College of Music. And then I said, well, who needs music school when I'm, one of the top drummers in the city, and I'll soon be playing with Earth, Wind and Fire or, Chicago or some top band, and I'm playing in nightclubs and stuff at a really young age, playing with my band director. So I walked into Spiasha, 980 North Michigan, and one of my classmates was the executive steward. And he said, James, what are you doing here? And I said, man, I'm looking for a job. And it's me and one of my childhood friends. He says, well, can you cook? And I said, sure, I can cook. I can make cheeseburgers and hamburgers and, I'm good at grilled beans and bologna sandwiches and stuff and fish sticks, like, nah, that's not quite what this is in detailed. And before I knew it, I was catapulted. I was shot out of a cannon into the world, the underbelly of high-end fine dining. It's Northern Italian cuisine. And next thing I know, I'm making calamari and we're taking the extracts out of cuttlefish to make fettuccine nere. I got some real hands-on training. And I was a walking nightmare and a disaster in the kitchen for many years.
Why do you say that?
Well, I walked in the kitchen and I got no culinary degree, no pedigree, no culinary experience. I'm around Johnston & Wales grads. I'm around CIA grads. Back in the day, Adam, you better Chicago. Washburn Trade School was a big place for cooks to go, chic hospitality. And, here I am, this kid that I didn't know a spoon from a colander. I didn't know a sieve from a chinois. I didn't, and I remember my first moment of truth was when I burned 4 boxes of pine nuts in a day. and those things I remember. And they just sat and watched, because no one told me that, 5 minutes, 3 minutes top in an oven at 350, nobody told me how much they cost. Nobody said anything. And so they just watched me kind of stumble and bumble through the kitchen. And I was, the kitchen joke.
Wait, before you go, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to make a point about the fact that, the type of training and mentorship that you got at Spiasha, that's the way it used to be in every restaurant, right? And the fact that they allowed you to burn 4 boxes of pine nuts and didn't say anything is kind of like, yeah, he's going to learn. Now anybody tries to do that and, their ass is out the street because, how much that costs. And there is an expense when you have apprentices, but that type of training, have you ever burned a pine nut ever since then?
No, and I won't let anybody else burn them either, because I know how much it costs, but the most valuable thing. So I give homage to Anthony J. Montuano, who is the executive chef and part owner of Spiasha, because he worked for the Levies for a long time. And, he's been all over the place. He was in the spotlight for a minute with Francetta breads, because Mario Batali and Tony Montuano and a couple other Italian chefs were all kind of sponsors of it. And it was in the heyday in Chicago when hot cuisine was all over the place. Nouvelle cuisine was all over the place. If you had bistro or Victoria or Italian restaurant or any of those places were all over the place. And he pulled me in the office one day and said, guess what? And I just know he's going to fire me. He says, you're a train wreck, but I love the fact you show up every day and you take the abuse off these guys. He said, every non-speaking dishwasher I have in my kitchen can probably outcook my best, executive sous chef, and they can't speak a lick of English. He said, the fact that you show up every day and you take crap off these guys. Is this a non-profanity show? Because I might drop the F-bomb. I might drop a few slurs.
Yeah, dude, profanity is encouraged on this show. We get the big E in front of our name. We don't give a shit. Fuck it. Drop it if you want to.
As you're about dumb as a bag of rocks, but the rest of those assholes in the kitchen, I'd have you work any day, over them, because you take a lot of crap off of. And, the inevitable happened. Somebody called off, and that happens in our world. Somebody's demise is somebody's success in our world. And so somebody screwed up, didn't make their chef, and next thing you know, I was sauteing in the cafe. And he asked me, James, I'm gonna throw you in the cafe, you're gonna saute. I couldn't say it, let alone pronounce it or spell it at the time. I didn't know, I didn't have a clue what sauteing meant. So before I knew it, I was making, carpaccio plates and pasticcio and vongales and ossobuco and bucatini amatricianas, and my vernacular had changed, and I had always had language in school. And one thing led to another, man. And before I knew it, I was aroused. I was a first tornado. I was working for the Levies at several properties, and I got good at it, And I had to deal with the other pink elephant in the room. I'm the only black guy in the kitchen in a 5-star restaurant. With no pedigree. And that existed then, and it still kind of exists now to some degree. I'm really ecstatic when I go on LinkedIn and I see a vast array of people of color at the level of executive chefs and beyond that, who have broken those glass ceilings and got past the stereotypical male European dominated industry of I'm French, I'm Austrian, I'm German, I'm Italian, I'm from somewhere in Europe, and now I'm an executive chef, and you're supposed to bow down to me, So we broken those stereotypes, man, and I always, I'm humbled and grateful at where the universe has sent me, and where the God of my own understanding has placed me in doing what I do, and so I always reach back. I don't look down on people. If I'm looking down, I'm looking down to reach up, to reach my hand out to pick you up, because I've seen it happen. I've had a woman sous chef, and she was a killer. She was a beast, man. It was African-American sister who I made my sous chef, and couldn't nobody understand why did I do that? It's because she cared. At the end of the day, do you care about the product you put out, what you do, how you do it? I don't care where you come from, what walk of life, what pedigree. I'd rather have somebody that shows up to work on time in a clean apron and a coat and a uniform, and they could be the worst thing under the sun, culinary wise in the kitchen, but it's the attitude. And Tony told me, he said, you got the heart of a lion. He said, one day you'll be good at this. And I didn't take it seriously. And I worked for the city of Chicago for a lot of years, and I cooked it. And I called myself Moonlighting until I ran up on this cat named Adam Lamb, who said, man, you're good at this. You got to make a career. I ran up on this guy with a mullet and a long ponytail and goatee and real hip, the swashbuckler in the kitchen, They said, man, you ought to take this serious. Shirley, dog, you're good at this. And so here I am.
That was my very first sous chef job.
At Dickens.
True one, in an operation that's doing, they said they expected to do $2.8 million the first year. I think they did like 18. I mean, we were doing dishes in the parking lot. The goddamn place was so busy. Of course, that was 1986. Bears had just won the Super Bowl, and Bob's your uncle. So here you are, you're still working for the city of Chicago. It's funny because you say, I always thought that you were moonlighting because, you had that expensive habit, that car of yours.
Yeah.
That was beautiful, man. It was beautiful.
Hey, every brother's got to have a whip, a ride, man. And I had this Delta 88 Royale Broham that my grandfather took me to Hanley Dawson Cadillac to buy. And anybody that's from Chicago that can go back in their time machine, they'll remember Hanley Dawson Cadillac. So I'm kind of predating myself too as well. So, but it was on, Hanley Dawson Cadillac was down the street from Dickens because it was around the corner on LaSalle, I believe, either on Ohio or off of LaSalle or something like that. And they were next to Maury Major's Sporting Goods and stuff like that. So I got this car, and, I had went through my first car, And, I was like, okay, I got a real automobile, and it was tricked out with tinted windows and opera lights and, you know, uh, had the Jensen speakers and Alpine amp,
The wheels and the tires and everything.
like just say cars got out with the booming system, baby, you know, uh, and, uh, and it was cool. It was cool, man. I had a lot of other, strange appetites too, then that I was just all over the place, man, being young and crazy.
You're not saying that the reason that you decided that you were going to go into this full time is because of a conversation you and I had.
It's funny how you have conversations with people and they impact your life. And then later on, it's like an old song. Mama always said in days like this, and you hear that voice somewhere, you planted a seed, Adam. And thank God for that. You planted a seed, but the inevitable happened. I got good, and I got really good at what I was doing. I didn't know I was good at it. And I didn't know it was meant for me to do it because I couldn't find my way. I had worked through some of the finest restaurants, and it's funny that people talk about, Grant Atchis and Charlie Trotter and all these other chefs that are out there, the Michael Cornicks and stuff. And I remember working at Gordon's when they coming through the door. And so I worked at this famous restaurant owned by this famous restaurateur named Gordon Sinclair. He had a place in called in Jupiter, Florida, I believe. But he also had the knack of finding talent. So he found Charlie Trotter. He found Grant Atchis. He found, I think he was affiliated with Norman Van Aken. He's had this whole line cast of great chefs that have come through the Windy City in the Midwest that he went out and, he recruited or he had hired, he had a bigger dollar. It's like the professional athletes, he had a bigger paycheck a bigger offer on the table. And, I got a chance to work around these guys. And so everywhere you work back then, if you could master the broiler station, you could walk in any restaurant and get a job as a broiler cook. And if you had a reputation on the Magnificent Mile and the Gold Coast, Adam, it was like somebody hired that guy. He's working the broiler at the pump room, or he's working the broiler at Hugo's South Park. Yeah, or Larry's Prime Rib. He's working Morton Steakhouse. He's the broiler guy over there. That's what I'm gonna get. And these owners knew that these guys were good because they kept their money coming in and they weren't going to lose them. So, that back then you could get paid what you were worth in a sense, almost, you had owners that was willing to pay that.
So before you get any further, you mentioned that your family was originally from the South. Where do people hail from?
Well, Jackson, Mississippi, and throughout the South. I've got family in Jackson. I've got family in Alabama and New Orleans. And right now, my grandparents migrated from the South right around the time this individual named Emmett Till was lynched. And in the South, lynching was prevalent. And my grandparents got out because my uncle was prominent, educated, good looking, and they didn't want him to be a statistic. They didn't want him to be another one of our, George Floyd type situations that went on back then. And so they came north and they did what most Black families do when they leave the South. They migrate to metropolis areas and big cities, and they get these jobs, factory jobs, industrial jobs. And my grandmother was a seamstress, and then she had lost her sight and regained her sight. And my grandfather, they were both uneducated, and they raised 5 generations of us, of kids, who are doing really well. And my grandfather worked at Reynolds Foil Company that make Reynolds aluminum foil, and his family had property on the South Side, and they lived in the Bronxville area, and which is really up and booming and popular now in Chicago. Property values up. They're doing well in Bronxville. And I was just taught that, there was never a day that we went without food. There was never a day that we went without lights. Never a day we went without gas. There was nothing that they would not do for me. My early years, I did not have a working, functioning relationship with my mom. I grew up kind of confused, a little bit angry and frustrated, because all my friends had younger parents and I was raised by these older people. And kids are cruel because they tell you the truth. They say exactly what they see, not what they know. And all the time they say, you're fat, you're black, you're white, you're ugly, you're skinny, you're buck teeth, you're bald, your mom is big, you're poor. They say things like that to each other. And we don't know the impact it has on us growing up into our adult life, the things that were said to us and how they made us feel and what eventually became of us, because in the back of our psyche, in the back of my mind, I had to fight those demons off of hearing that. I have a beautiful relationship with my mother now, but my grandparents came up north, and that's what happened.
Was it because Betty was so involved in her career that she wasn't around much?
My mother wasn't able to raise kids. My mother was not fit to be a mother at that time, and she openly admits that. And she talks about being grateful that my grandmother raised her kids, because my mother is a product of the 60s, the 70s, the post the Vietnam era, free love and free speech and hippies and drugs has always been around for years. It just has had different generational aspects. And during the 60s, people were experimenting. And my mom she sang in New York for a while, and, before she got her act together, because she had to go through some stuff too. But I'm very proud of my mom. My mom is my hero today, because of what she went through. It made me stronger. I didn't know some things. I didn't know the truth about why my mother wasn't present until I became older. And, I got involved in a 12-step program that helped me do some research and find out some things about why I did what I did and what made me do what I do. And that helped me to get my life back. I think recovery is called recovery for a reason, because it helps people regain some things and get their life back. So my mom is great. She's my hero, and my grandparents, God bless them, and when my grandfather had started getting ill, I was at Dickers, and I remember, the whole team at Dickers was like, you take as long as you need to take care of your grandfather. I'll never forget getting that call when he first had his first stroke. And he was on his way, he was at work, and he was 70 something years old, still riding public transportation, riding the L, going to Springfield pumping station, getting off on, I think, Grand or either North Avenue, and going up to Springfield pumping station, and I took care of him. I took care of him until the day he died,
You just put out so much, man. And I just want to step back a little bit, because you made some, like, James, when you get on a roll, man, you throw out stuff that, would leave most people like slack-jawed, like what are you talking about? So I want to kind of revisit this whole point about being good to your life. And so there's no secret that, our past has been intertwined for both good and bad reasons. And we followed each other's story. And, the fact is that we both had some rough times and we came through it, and it made us stronger. And I think made us both probably more empathetic to others that might be challenged the same way. I know that you're still heavily involved in the recovery kind of network, and you make yourself available, and you want to make sure that you stand for those people. And that's not an attitude that's usually shared, especially in the hospitality industry. It's changing now, thankfully. But, now that door's open up a creek, I want to kick that motherfucker down, because there's lots of stuff that I would have changed had I had the power back then. But I also know a bunch of guys, men and women, who in this industry who love to bitch, and they'll be the first one to talk about why things suck and why the place sucks and why the customers suck and why the bosses suck and da 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 da. I see it all the time on Facebook, and my deep desire is that they have their own awakening and realize that they're the only ones that have the power to change anything. So when you talk about stuff like being good to your life, I need to know exactly, like, in concrete terms, what that looks like, because I know how everything's energetically connected. You're preaching to the choir right now, but there's a bunch of people out there who probably need this message more than anything else in their life right now, because either you're going to be a victim or you're going to be a leader. And I believe there's greatness in everybody that's in this industry, and or the capacity they have greatness about something, some particular thing. And I want to encourage them to get in and get their fucking work done. So what do you mean by being good to your life?
What I mean by that is, first of all, acceptance is the key for anything. And you got to be able to accept where you're at. And I mean, you touched on a lot of things, because we live in a world that's kind of a pseudo-masochistic relationship. We go through a lot of abuse from our employer, from our customers, from our families, from everybody else, to not only put bread on the table, but to do what we do well and show up every day. It's like leaving the dungeon and showing up again for the next day. You just got to know what the safe word is to get out, and I always use the analogy, being in the culinary world is like a pseudo-masochistic relationship. You just got to know when to say ouch or when to get out, because if you don't, you'll burn. You'll implode, you'll self-destruct. I mean, now we're reading and hearing about some of our world's most admired culinary people ending their lives, or lives coming to an end, or falling. The fall from grace is very painful and very long. And if you don't have humility as a key, then the fall will be even worse. I live every day with the mantra in my head that I am as only good as my last meal. I don't care who I fed, how well it went. I saw my resume and my pedigree. If I fucked up a barbecue with hot dogs for 5 kids, then I got to live with that, because I'm as only good as my last meal. And that could be the catalyst that a GM or an executive or somebody come raining down fire on us. That'll turn our whole world upside down. And I'll walk off without humility with saying, what? Ain't no big deal. It's just some kids. It was hot dogs. Why are you tripping? Why are you having a fit about it? But it was the CEO's kid that was there. It was the president's kid, somebody else's kid. And then I'm saying in my head, why is this guy talking to me? Doesn't he know who I am? The question is do I know who I am? And that we suffer with a lot of frailties and things that happen for us. And that the number one thing that eludes us in our industry is balance. And that I have to, at some point, know when to tap out, after 10 and 12 hours, knowing that it'll be there tomorrow. I've watched too many of us burn up and crash because success is driving us. And I refuse to be behind the deadline because I didn't have the menu written. I didn't have the menu costed out in time. I didn't have people, and granted, you got good bosses, and then you got bosses who are not good. And when you got people that you can't say, hey, I didn't get it done today. I'm sorry. I'll get it done tomorrow. And you can explain to that why it didn't happen. Time management. We started off talking about time management and talking about how my wife has poor time management, and it impedes it.
I wasn't going to bring that up. I was going to edit that out, man.
Okay, but hey,
I was going to edit that out.
Okay.
We're going to include.
It's too late. That's not the bag. Hey,
it's no news to.
It's right. No secret.
It's no news to her.
But she's my muse. Let me say this. This is my second marriage, and to take my wife through what I've taken her through, I mean, she's worth her weight in gold, because being married to somebody like us, or even in a relationship with somebody like us, you got to examine their psyche and ask them, because they got to know what they're signing up for. They got to know that I'll say I'll be back and I may not come back until tomorrow. They got to understand, when I say I promised we were going out, hey, I'm sorry, party, VIP pop up, I got to do it. And we go later. We live with a lot of broken promises. And at some point we have to learn how to balance that to make good on that in our lives. That's what I talk about. My life isn't good. I'm good to my life. I've started to do a lot of different things. Like for instance, we don't want to talk about getting therapy. We think that's taboo for chefs to talk about having a therapist, getting some mental health. Mental health dominates our industry because we're these brilliant savants with food and gastronomy engineers, and we're these culinarians, and we're these epicureans, and we're these brilliant food minds, and they don't know what goes on behind that. It's like being a Robin Williams of a Scott, being a part Robin Williams and part of Scoffier. You know what I'm saying? It's like nobody knows what goes on mind of a genius when they have to show up and perform every day, and the pressure behind that. Nobody knows what happens with us when, how many chefs that that have had one marriage, or that are still married? How many chefs that that are willing to admit that they weren't there for the kids' graduation, the kids' prom, the kids this, because they were at work and some fine-in dinner or something else going on? How many chefs that's going to admit they got a drinking problem, they got an addiction, they got a substance abuse problem, or if it's not that, they got some other dark secret, because after leaving work, you got to find an avenue to feed this monster that's going up raging on the inside because you kept your cool all day. You didn't punch anybody out. You didn't cuss out your boss. You didn't have a Gordon Ramsay moment and insult people and shove. I remember chefs would come in and just shove your fucking mise en place off the counter or on the floor, not just because you screwed up, but because we're having a bad day. And they had to have some kind of way to take it out on someone. So let me take it out on my kitchen.
So you bring up really great points again, but here's the piece that's missing. And you start out by talking about, it's not necessarily, it's frowned upon to talk about the fact that, you might need some help with the way you're processing things. The fact of the matter is, when you're creative, and we can be creative in lots of different ways, we can be creative in planning the execution of a banquet, not necessarily the food, but how you get all the components put together. Sometimes all the pieces are moving around in your head and you can't even explain to anybody how you come to this point, but you just know it's right. And I just want to remind everybody, because I think we forget about this because we get so caught up in the bullshit, is that we're all very, 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 very fucking sensitive people in a world that doesn't really fucking appreciate sensitive people. So what the fuck are you supposed to do with that? Well, the first thing is acknowledge the fact that you're sensitive. Nothing wrong with that. Doesn't make you any less than or more than. Doesn't make you any more artistic or less artistic. But if you're not in your truth about who you are, that's one of the things I love about you, James, so much, is there is no fucking pretense about, you own every single fucking bit of you. You own your work ethic. You own the circumstances that you find yourself in. I've never heard you throw anybody under the fucking bus other than to say, that dude's an asshole. Right? But you never made it up that, they were keeping you for anything else. So the fact is that once I acknowledge the fact that I was, sensitive, which is weird because I'm a big dude and people don't expect that to be coming out, but at least it gave me a way to access a healing that before was, I couldn't show any weakness or tenderness or compassion or vulnerability or transparency to anybody. Especially in the brigade. Fuck that, man, because I need you to jump. What? How high? Oui, chef. Okay, now let's go. When in fact, it took me probably, man. probably 15, 18 years before I recognized that I hire and manage whole human beings, not just a fucking name on a schedule. And the quicker I get hip to that so that I can be with them where they're at, the better the whole organization runs. But, you know, I had to take away this dude's pride. Once in the office, fuck, man, it makes me so fucking embarrassed to talk about this. But, you know, he's a happy-go-lucky dude. And, you know, he just, everywhere he went, you know, things were on fire around him. You know, he found himself in the worst situations. And I brought him into the office and just tore him down verbally, man. And he dropped to his knees and started screaming out. And I thought to myself, holy fuck, what have I done? Because I know, you know, you talk about people like Storm and Norman and some other people that we've known. You take away a person's dignity, then they're capable of doing anything, man. And it wasn't that I was scared of my safety, but I just saw just how fucking wrong I was for a lot of years to a lot of people. And there's nothing I can ever do to take that back or make it better, but I can certainly try to do something with that acknowledgement and that realization, which is, you know, carve out a path forward with a new way of thinking and a new way of being in this industry that's possible for all of us. Because I think probably you included, and you can agree with me or not agree with me, it's how we all wanted to be treated. You know, none of us wanted to be treated like shit and have the fucking chef come out and fucking dump our meats on the fucking floor because he's having a bad day. Fuck that shit.
I got to tell you, Adam, what you're doing and what you've done with this, if nobody's told you from our community, I want to thank you, because you open up some boundaries and some doors, man, for us to get nitty gritty and talk about exact nature, what really goes on, about what really happens. You know, I don't know if you're aware of what you've done and how you've done this, you know, to what capacity, you know, how you've impacted us, man. You know, you've given us a vehicle that we wouldn't normally have in a real world setting to talk about. And this isn't the trash the organization show. This isn't the trash the employer show. This isn't the trash the cook show. This is a vehicle for us to tell our side of the story like it really is, you know, and like you say, tell it like it is, you know. I love you, man. We've been through so many things together, man. You've always been my brother from another mother, man. You know, you've always been there. I've been so proud to watch you evolve as well, to go through what you're going through, man, and what you've been through, and how, you know, you're like the raft in a fume. You know, you always rise to the top. You know, you're like that raft in a fume. You know, you rise to the top. You know, you're like letting that slow roll go, and you just skim off the top, man. And each time you skim off another layer of the top, like a fume, it gets more pristine. You could see to the bottom on it. You know, those of us who've had that, you know, pedigree, that level of technique, we've learned that a good fume is that you could see.
Yeah, who know how to make it.
You could look through it. You could look all the way down to the bottom. It's pristine, it's clear, but all the flavor is there, man. And that's what you've done, you know. And it's like, for us to be still connected after so many people that have fallen off the face of the earth that we've known together, that have disappeared, that have vanished. I mean, we've known people who crashed and burned. You know, I got to give homage to those who paved the way before me, you know, that have struggled internally and not been able to get the help or say anything, you know, like a Anthony Bourdain, you know, like a Charlie Trotter, you know, there's people who are out there that are not the Anthony Bourdain and Charlie Trotters, who are just as good and who are behind the scenes, and they don't get the recognition. Nobody would know that I've fed Colin Powell and Gorbachev and Bush and you know, and Christine Lagarde of the International Monetary Fund, and you know, we could tout off all these people, but nobody in a million years would know that, you know. And something I started doing is that I would always wear my chef coat to work, and back and forth because I just walk in the door ready to go. And my wife said to me, why do you not just want to be a human being when you get off of work? Why is it that you're a chef 24/7? I don't, and she helped me with this. So I got like pullover sweats and, I got some long sleeve tees that I wear to work. And I changed I get into that. I got to remember when I'm at home and my wife's cooking me a meal, I'm not the chef. I'm her husband. If my kids want to take me to dinner, I'm not the chef. I try my best and, to sit in the seat and be patient with the poor service, the cold mashed potatoes or whatever happens. I'm not going to let anything happen on my watch either. If I'm out with my family and friends and the service and the food is not right, I mean, we're the worst people to dine with, the worst people to go out to dinner with, because we're picking everything apart, man. But back to how much I love you, Adam Lamb, and how proud I am of you, man. I told a few people about this, and I got to give shouts out to my senior management team. It's been a long time coming since I worked not only in a place that anybody would love to work at, but to work around and work with people I love going to work with every day, man. I could truly say my boss is my work sister, work wife. My district manager is my work big brother, my confidant, my friend. I have a supporting management team around me. The organization that I work for, I've been working for a long time. They have been great. And not all organizations get it right. I mean, hey, they make some bad decisions along the way too, and it impacts people at every level, but they've done right by me, and they've done well, and, I've been blessed, man, this whole journey, I've been blessed. I thought I was going to try to get through this without crying because I'm a crybaby and I'm real sensitive, but, seriously, man, when I look at, I'm sitting here and on that side of me is Diamond Inn, and on this side of me is the ocean. And I grew up riding the L to work. When this all started, I was riding the mean green limousine. I was riding CTA.
The 111th in Cottage Grove.
Yep. Over there on King Drive.
I thank you, man. And you made my point for me really, because I've had this ongoing argument with somebody I love very dearly about, when you're a chef, that's who you are. And my shot back is always like, that's bullshit. As long as you identify with being a chef, like as who I am, then you're liable to put yourself in situations that are not healthy, both mentally, physically, or emotionally. And so I would tag on with what you said, James. And so maybe a shift in perspective is identifying yourself as a human being that has needs and desires, and maybe sometimes just want to go get a fucking pedicure, man. I love pedicures, man. This is fantastic. That's it for this episode of Chef Life Radio. If you enjoyed it, it made you think, laugh, or get pissed off, then please tell a friend. Get your free copy of 3 Ideas for Less Chef Stress by signing up for our monthly newsletter at chefliferadio.com/sign up. Here at Chef Life Radio, we believe that working in a kitchen should be demanding. It just shouldn't have to be demeaning. It should be hard. It just doesn't have to be harsh. We believe that it's possible to have more solidarity and less suck it up sunshine, more compassion, less cutthroat island. We believe in more partnership and less put up or shut up, more community, and a lot less fuck you. Finally, consider for a second, for all the blood, sweat, and sometimes even tears we put into what we do, really, at the end of the day, that's just some brown stuff on a plate. None of it really matters. It doesn't define you as a person or make you any more special or less than anyone else. It's just a dance we're engaged in, so we might as well laugh and enjoy every bit of it, even the crappy parts, while we're doing it. Or didn't you know that the purpose of your life should be to enjoy it?
Like it, Hefe. I fucking love it. I am humble. The goddamn glory box I don't live on now.
Follow us at facebook.com, Chef Life Radio, Twitter at Chef Life Radio, on Instagram at Chef Life Radio, and check out our website, chefliferadio.com.
Oh, yes, Chef.
Stand tall and frosty, brothers and sisters. Until next time, be well and do good. Leave the light on, honey. I'm coming home late. This show was produced, recorded, and edited by me, Adam Lamb, at the Dish Pit Studios in Bartow, North Carolina. This has been a production of Realignment Media.